back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for continuing to stick with me. One of the greatest things that I've been able to accomplish by doing this podcast is not only coming in and being able to tell my own story, but allowing others to come in and share their personal connections. I've had the honor of being able to interview doctors and researchers, scientists, families, organizations, all getting our personal insight out there that a lot of the world doesn't see because we're under the shadow of maybe one commercial in the media and a really nasty word called rare, which again, you're not going to hear me say it when it comes to this word. So today, my guest is no exception to that. Dr. Jess Puzzuoli is joining me today, and she has a personal connection, but also a personal or a unique kind of journey through all of this. And so thank you for being with me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So when I did and I actually listened to the podcast that you sent me as well. So I got a little bit of insight into who you are. And so you have a personal connection to this. And I think we also have kind of a mutual in that I was able to interview Jordan from with pediatric cancer as well. And which, again, very unique path with how she got to where she is and why she does everything. But tell us a little bit about you and how you got into this space and how you got into our big, wonderful community of pediatric cancer that nobody wants to be a part of, but by far the strongest group of people I've ever been with.
Yes, nobody signs up for this willingly. So my sister Sarah was diagnosed when she was 3 years old. I was 8 at the time, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma. And she was treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering, which I will refer to as MSK moving forward. And she lost her battle about 10 to 11 months after diagnosis. So she was just 1 month after her 4th birthday, and I was 9 years old at the time. So I had always, my favorite gift growing up, and if anyone here knows me or is listening, when they listen, I tell this story all the time. My favorite Christmas gift ever that I can even remember was when I was 3 years old. I got one of those Fisher Price medical kits that I used to carry around everywhere. I was one of those kids that's I want to be a doctor when I grow up, and so that was already in my head. I was a very inquisitive child when it came to things of medical nature. So when Sarah was diagnosed, we basically lived at MSK. I mean, we lived there. And you have to keep in mind also that it was 1991. Okay, so this was a very different world. There was no internet, there was no Google, there was no social media, there were no fight pages, there was no GoFundMe. You were very isolated in this little microcosm of pediatric cancer when people didn't even realize kids could get cancer, and you basically had the families on the floor that were all being treated at the same time. So, living on the 9th floor, MSK Kids, pediatric ward of MSK, I was in awe of her doctors and in awe of everything. I know this sounds weird and bizarre, but I actually found comfort in being in the hospital. They were wonderful. We were all included in everything that was going on. And they knew that I was I was very invested in knowing every move that was being made, and I was only 8 and 9 years old. So I used to look at her team and be like, I want to be you when I grow up. For some reason, it was just okay, this is why we're here sort of deal. And I know that sounds sick and weird, but that was kind of how it happened. And after she passed away, that was, it was the decision. It wasn't going into medicine or medical research. It was now I know the subject content and where I'm going and what field I'm going into. And a lot of people think it's kind of insane. And I wouldn't disagree with them to basically put yourself, because now, by the way, her team that I considered my superheroes are my colleagues. So that's pretty wild. I mean, even for me, I'm can't believe I'm working with you. You are the reason I pulled all-nighters studying and worked my way to be here all these years. You basically put yourself back at the scene of the crime, and people think that that's nuts, but I just feel that that's where I want to be. It's what I do. It's my love. It's my passion. And having come from being in that place, I think it makes me even better at what I do.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I've spoken to multiple people throughout this podcast journey, mothers and survivors and them that are going into the medical field after the battle, post-treatment, no matter what the outcome is, because you get so motivated by what you see. And the reality of it is you can understand that you offer a unique perspective to patients or to research because you've been there, you've seen it, and you offer something that not a lot of people can. And that lived experience is huge when it comes to any career. But when you're going into medicine like this, I mean, I truly believe that we're put here on this earth for a reason, but we don't know what it is until maybe later in life. And then you get to a point and you realize that's why I was put here. It wasn't the road I wish that would have got me here and the experiences you had to live through, but you're giving back and honoring in such an incredible way so that other parents and patients and children and families don't have to feel everything that you did. And it is different now, but there still is a lot of, I mean, our daughter was diagnosed in 2020. I mean, COVID, the world shut down. I mean, talk about isolation, but yeah, we felt like we were on an island because unless you know people in the community, you're searching for anything.
Mm-hmm. And just to speak to that point that you just made, my mother was actually a homemaker because there were three of us. My sister was the youngest, I'm the eldest, and my brother is the middle. And after Sarah passed away, she put herself through nursing school and became a nurse. So there's that. And then to speak to another point you just made, a very, very good family friend of ours, I mean, from years back, you know, my mom is the youngest of several siblings, said to me one day, this was probably, I think when I was my second or third year of medical school, she looked at me, we were at like a dinner, and she was like, you know what? She goes, everything that happened is absolutely horrific. She goes, but Sarah gave you a beautiful gift. She gave you the gift of your purpose. And that has stuck in my head and still like gets me choked up to this day because it's true.
Yeah, no, that you couldn't have said it any better. And the one thing that always kind of gets me, and I try to hold it together, and it's through everything that our daughter went through. It was at her funeral, and the pastor at the time said the one thing that broke me. I was good the entire day because I think at that point I was out of tears. And what he said to me, that was when she got to heaven, when JC got to heaven, she said, "But I only had 8 years." And he looked at her and said, "But look what you did with those 8 years." And that has always stuck with me because that purpose, yeah, it breaks my heart, but at the same time, it shows me exactly what she left behind, that purpose, the legacy, the trail, because it affected people that, you know, I've got text messages on my phone from people that I have no idea who they are, and they never said who they were, but her journey and her life affected so many people. And that's exactly the same thing. They leave behind a lot of things, and they come back and tell us what we need to do and point us in the right direction and affect us for years to come. But these children's journeys are so important to what we're doing now. I didn't expect that this was going to be my life path at this point. You know, to be honest with you, I thought I was going to, I worked for the Postal Service for 12 years. I thought I was going to retire broken and not able to walk and just, you know, from years and years of being outside and all of that. And I thought that's the path. And it all shifted when this life came at us super fast.
Yeah, and it sure does, as you know. Yeah, I mean, Sarah, so I guess to kind of delve into just how these things do progress so quickly. So Sarah was stage 4 neuroblastoma, and neuroblastoma tends to originate in the abdomen. So 65% of neuroblastoma tumors originate in the abdomen, actually. That's my specialty. I'm neuroendocrine tumors. So shocking, right? Anyway, so with a lot of these cancers, now, again, Sarah was diagnosed at 3. The older that the kids get, the worse the prognosis is. But the problem is that all of the symptoms of so many of these pediatric cancers are just general, like, it's a kid, you know what I mean? Like, she's got a cold, or she's got a flu, or she's like a little tired, or, oh, her belly's a little distended because she's constipated and has gas. Yeah, that's normal kid stuff, you know? And the way that it happened with her was she had gotten what, you know, we thought was a cold or flu, went to the pediatrician, cold or flu, you know, waited out, fluids, amoxicillin, here you go. persisted. And now as a parent, you know when there's something wrong with your child better than anyone else in the world. And we went back again a couple weeks later, same thing. Oh, she's fine. A couple weeks later, it's still persisting. She's getting very kind of lethargic, which was not like her. And her gait changed. And she was having pain in her hips and her knees. Now, again, she's this tiny little 3-year-old. So my mom was like, something is definitely wrong. We go back again. Now they're like, oh, maybe it's juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And now I was only 8 years old. So I was kind of left out of the conversation at this point because everyone, I think, or at least my mom, was realizing that there was something else going on here. But the next thing I know, there was an appointment at MSK, and I didn't know what MSK was at the time. And she was literally admitted that day, like that day. That does not happen a whole lot, I will tell you. And so by the next morning, now a couple of the features of metastatic neuroblastoma. So this is at the point where you are absolutely stage 4 and it has spread. It has time to spread. She woke up with a black eye. So gait changes, bone pain, and black eyes are huge indicators that there is cancer all over the body. And that was literally overnight after being admitted to MSK. So that's how fast things happen. And if you look at something like DIPG, for those that don't know, it's diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. It is probably the most catastrophic of childhood cancers. It is in your pons gland, which is in the back of your brain. That's a 0% survival rate at 5 years. I mean, maybe 1%. But upon diagnosis, 3 to 9 months, I mean, it hits fast and furious, and it's just a whirlwind because you're also dealing with the effects of treatment and having to deal with that whole thing on top of the cancer narrative. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's brain cancer we're already underfunded, period, in pediatric cancer overall, and brain cancer is even less than that, but yet the most deadly of pediatric cancers. And our daughter had CPC, for anybody that doesn't know, choroid plexus carcinoma, which is aggressive and fast growing, but very misunderstood. People don't understand. I don't think it's a lack of trying, but I think that, research is proven that there's not a whole lot of understanding of why, how, and what to do with it. She was treated with ICE chemotherapy, which is specifically made for Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's. That's the way it goes. Did not go well the first couple of rounds. We had to change things. And, chemo was very hard for her. And chemo for these children is super intense. And, it's a misnomer that when their hair starts to grow back, that everything's okay.
That drives me bonkers when people think that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, well, they must be good then, right? Their hair's growing back. Well, our daughter's hair fell out 3 times during treatment, and it was beautiful and red when she started out, and then it came back and it wasn't the same color. It's there's a lot of different things that people don't understand, and and this is never for me to personally attack an organization or anything like that, but I say the commercial people. That's what I say, because that commercial unfortunately gives us a false understanding or a false feeling about what pediatric cancer is. It uses the rare, it uses the cure rate, it uses and that cure rate is attached to a 5-year limit. And there's so many things that because of that, I think it handicaps us in moving forward. And that's an unfortunate side effect to the long list of side effects that these children go through. But for us in general, trying to make a change, the way that it's, for lack of a better way to put it, the way that it's marketed is detrimental to us and our kids.
It drives me absolutely insane because, for the record, incidence rates are rising. We right now are at 1 in 231 children under the age of 18 or will be diagnosed by the age of 18. That is, so 3 years ago, it was 1 in 288 under the age of 18 would be diagnosed. So that's a rising rate, just in case anyone was wondering. And it drives me insane. First of all, 1 in 5 children will not make it after diagnosis. And as you refer to the commercial people, thank you for doing that. That is not what the hospital hallways look like on a normal basis. And those commercial people are not there when the child is literally has such bad mouth sores that you're suctioning their mouths out, because otherwise they're going to choke to death on their own saliva. And they have these gaping suture wounds from major surgeries, and they're recovering from bone marrow aspirates, and they have to have their port accessed. Not there for any of this. So you're right, it is a marketing thing. And that upsets me. And back to the incidence rates, what's really bothered me in the last several years, particularly the last 2 or 3, is that I see on a lot of fundraising stuff, childhood cancer research foundations that are not that big or whatever. I'm not going to name drop. And again, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's not an ignorance, because that's not the right word. It's just kind of people not understanding the statistics and like what they actually mean. And that's okay. But the big thing now is I've seen on a couple of different sites, like, we've had such amazing improvements. The 5-year survival rate for pediatric cancer is over 80%. Now, let me just break this down for a second, if that's okay. First of all, overall pediatric cancer. Let's talk about that. There are 12 major types of pediatric cancer with over 165 specific subtypes. You can't just say pediatric cancer and think that it's all encompassing. They all behave differently. They all are aggressive in different ways. They all have different mutations. They all react to treatment differently. You can take 5 kids with stage 4 neuroblastoma, and each of them will react to treatment differently because they all have different mutations, or they're all, that's why when you come to MSK, no matter if you're a pediatric, an adolescent, or an adult, we have a database called Impact. So your tumor gets sequenced when you come to us, like that's so we know what your mutations are. But based on those mutations, that's how we try to do targeted therapies. But as far as the numbers go, 5-year survival rate. Let's talk about this for a second. People misinterpret what 5-year survival rate means. And I find this a lot. 5-year survival rate does not mean that you are necessarily out of the woods, or your NED, which is no evidence of disease, by the way, or that you're completely cancer-free or any of that. In statistics, it is very easy to skew things. And when you see 5-year survival rates, often if you're still alive in treatment after 5 years and you're still active in treatment, you could be having a spinal fusion and tomorrow is your 5-year, you're still breathing, you're still here. They will throw you into that category. That's a problem. People don't realize that. So 5-year survival rate just means that you are alive. That's not looking at long term. And if you look at a lot of studies, there's actually survival studies in adults, most of them, because by the way, I've done these, go out 10 to 20 years. You're not looking at necessarily just the short term. 5-year survival rate is mostly of utility when you're just trying to give patients and their families an idea of what prognostically we're looking at. But it does not mean that, and by the way, people are like, wow, it sounds like, you want there to not be success. And I'm like, let me tell you something. If there's success tomorrow, I will go, I've said this before, I'll go start a taco truck or a hot dog stand. I will be more than happy to never have to see or experience another child, or human for that matter, but particularly a child with cancer. And people, they're like, well, aren't there successes? There absolutely are. But it is over sensationalized that there has been all of this crazy progress, because that is absolutely not the truth. And it doesn't mean that there aren't great success stories and things are improving, but people aren't really delving into what's really going on, or don't really understand it, or don't have, or aren't privy to that information. It can be mismanaged. That makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely can. We hear it all, right? And when it gets forced on us, and we see it on the TV, or you see it on the internet, whatever, or TikTok, where it must be real. You see all of this and they tell you that it's under control. And that's been the basis of, I think, a lot of social media stuff that I've been doing lately, is that if you think it's under control, then you are completely misled.
You're not around it every day, or you've never seen it if you think
right. 100%, 100%. And it, like, I'm looking at it and saying, you're telling me that it's under control. You're telling me that the survival rate is going up. You're telling me this and that, but I'm still sitting here with my daughter not with me. So there's obviously not under control. And if there's so much progress happening, like, I love to go and hear that there's a new study that's happening or a new clinical trial or, success stories. As a matter of fact, I love hearing success stories. I
Of
love it.
course. Yeah.
I love hearing parents, that are going through this with their child, and they've hit a year, they've hit 2 years, and everything is going great, and the scans are wonderful. And a lot of times people in the very beginning would shy away from telling me that because they were afraid, it would make me feel a certain kind of way. But I love it because I want to see that. But we have to understand that the treatments are not necessarily changing the approved drugs for our kids to be treated, especially in brain cancer, are decades and decades and decades old. And it really does seem a lot of times like the whole team goes out into a room where there's a dartboard and throws a dart and says, okay, let's try this. And that's what we're left with, or not having access to certain types of treatments or information sharing and all this. There's a lot of things that hinder what we do. But I mean, it's a struggle that we have every day as to trying to find out what is the best step forward. What is the best step forward for people to listen and understand? Because when you're talking to, especially, politicians about this, or people that are going to make those decisions to help you with, money or funding or whatever, it's an unfortunate side effect of us to say, could be any of those children's pictures on your desk right now, like it was for us,
So it knocks on your door.
Yeah.
You
And
don't,
it's,
and you
and
don't wish that on anyone, by the way.
God, no.
It's a lack of, so just as an example, I mean, in 2025, so the federal government, and again, I don't know how much the audience knows, but the National Institute of Health is part of the federal government, which basically controls grant funding for research. NCI, National Cancer Institute, is part of the NIH. So the federal government in 2025 got $7.2 billion to distribute for cancer research. So that was their whole budget. Out of that $7.2 billion, $290 million went to all of pediatric cancer research. So you do the math. And I'm sure for those of you that do follow the childhood cancer community, you've heard more than 4, because we only get 4% of federal funding to do research. And with that, it's beyond limiting. It's bizarre. And I just told you guys that, there's 12 major types of pediatric cancer with over 165 specific subtypes. So all of that money is supposed to go into research for all of those cancers. Because let me tell you something, all those subtypes need different attention. And the problem that lies here is that when you get that money, and by the way, we're all competing for that money, so good luck with that, especially in the climate now, you have to decide, do you look at prevention? Do you look at diagnostics? Do you look at treatment? What do you look at? And guess what? What's the answer there? What's the obvious answer there? You look at how to treat what's in the moment, which is why also you look at adults, and we have screenings for adults for different diseases, for all different diseases. You've got pap smears, you've got mammograms, you've got colonoscopies, you've got endoscopies. When you get to a certain age, you're supposed to have these checkpoints for screening. That does not exist for children for cancer. For other diseases, genetic disorders, sickle cell anemia, things like that, yes, it certainly does. But unless you have a very robust cancer lineage in your family with very well-known genetic mutations, children are not tested for anything. So there's that. And then to get into the drug thing, so for example, doxorubicin, which is known as the Red Devil, was FDA approved in 1974 for use in adults. Guess what we use in children? Doxorubicin is called the Red Devil for a reason. It is one of the most toxic, horrific chemotherapies on the planet. It is so toxic. I mean, the nurses literally come in like hazmat suits to give this chemo. And this is a child, and they're having it mainlined into them while the nurse is in a hazmat suit. When you get any bodily fluids from a child on you that has gotten doxorubicin treatment, the hair will literally come off of your body, like off of your skin. When you change a diaper, you need to wear gloves, you need to be gowned. I mean, it is horrific. And again, this is what we're mainlining into our children because we have so few options. And, all chemo is toxic. That one is probably one of the worst. But there are, we're working on things. There's immunotherapies that are, we're trying so hard, and the funding is just a never ending battle. We have willing and able, brilliant minds with so many ideas and so much going on, and it's just roadblock after roadblock because of the funding crisis with this. And that's not a new situation. This has been what we've been dealing with forever.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that I'm a bit of an outlier in this community in the fact that I refuse to blame one person for the issues for decades. I think that, funding and NIH and grant removals and all that kind of stuff, I think it sucks and I think it hurts our community. But I also look back and say, but for the decades of 20, 30, 40 years prior to this, where the hell were the advancements that allowed my daughter to survive in 2020? When we were growing up as kids in the year 2000, I figured that by this time we were going to have, floating cars and stuff, and we can't even save a child from cancer. So it's like, I don't agree with a lot of things, but at the same time, I refuse to blame one person for everything. I think that it's a culmination, and that's the reality of it. And you look at it and say, 4%, that more than 4, we go to DC every single year to advocate for these kids, and they say, oh, we got it doubled to 8. Like, who cares? Like 8, that's terrible. 8%, you can't even get, why are we not 50-50? Do we not have therapies that are coming in that you're getting information from kids, from adults, and the stuff is cross-contaminating. You're getting that information to help both sides. Why is it that all the funding is going in one direction? It's because we are told that it's a rare disease. It falls under that stupid Rare Diseases Act because of population alone and population compared to adults. That's the only reason. And because of that, we feel like we don't need as much coverage. And here we are questioning and wondering. And so, that would bring me to this. You saw it then. What does the treatment for neuroblastoma look like today versus what it did when your sister was diagnosed? And, how has that changed and gotten better, gotten worse, anything?
Well, it should be noted first, I didn't mention this earlier, is that all of these horrific treatments, if and when, God willing, the children do survive, 2/3 of children of childhood cancer survivors have chronic lifelong problems, kidney failure, hearing loss, failure to thrive, sterility. The list goes on and on and on. Secondary cancers is a huge one. So there's that. That still exists. What has changed a little bit, so I'm going to give you a very specific example. Dr. Naikong Chung, who was on my sister's team, colleague of mine at MSK, neuroblastoma god, as far as I'm concerned. He started work on what we call monoclonal antibodies back in 1984. And what monoclonal antibodies do, it's part of immunotherapy treatment. So one of the hallmarks of cancer is that it is uncontrolled cell growth. Usually there's checkpoints and the cancer stops growing. But one of the things that cancer does is it evades the immune system. So the immune system doesn't realize it's being taken over by this cancerous growth. So the point to immunotherapy, and monoclonal antibodies are an example of that, is that instead of attacking the tumor, like a systemic attack, like the Red Devil or other chemotherapies, what it does is it goes to the immune system and it tries to wake the immune system up and have the immune system then recognize that there is cancer in the body. So he started doing this work in 1984. It was not FDA approved until 2015, which is absolutely absurd. And by the way, it was working, and it took that long to get approval for that. Another thing that's going on now is something called DFMO. And basically what that is it is used in neuroblastoma for what we call maintenance treatment. And there's an enzyme in your body that, again, we're talking about uncontrolled cell growth, that actually basically assists these cells in continuing to grow. And what DFMO is it's an inhibitor of this particular enzyme. So it slows the growth of the cancer cells. Now, this has been used in adult cancers for quite some time now. It's used in pancreatic, it's used in breast, it's used in several others. And now it was approved for maintenance in neuroblastoma patients. But again, they have to have relapsed in order to use it. There are clinical trials going on right now for use of DFMO in Ewing sarcoma and osteosarcoma in kids. So hopefully that will go somewhere. But again, we're dealing with children that have already relapsed. And the problem also with relapse and why we need stuff like DFMO is because once they relapse, they've already received an entire regimen of treatment. So often they're not responding to treatment again. Their tumors are not responding. So there's that. So another thing, and I won't go on too long about this, is there is a thing that I'm working on right now that involves radiation, but it's lower dose radiation. And again, I can't say much because it's kind of in the works and pretty novel, but it's going to be able to be used hopefully on both soft tissue tumors and solid tumors, because I'm solid tumor. So we're working on doing much lower dose radiation, and it's got to do with getting the immune system kind of jacked up and not doing these, again, systemic attacks with reduced side effects.
Yeah, no, it's because if anybody doesn't understand or doesn't know, chemo is essentially a bulldozer, and it is meant to take everything out. And and the one thing that I was completely ignorant to was, because of where our daughter's cancer was the blood-brain barrier, and I had no idea about it. And so chemo going through her body and what she went through for those first 5 treatments, me, it was essentially useless, and it beat the crap out of her, and it was very, very rough. And she developed a very horrible reaction to one of the drugs, to ifosfamide, and we had to take her off of it. And then they changed it they put on methylene blue to try to kind of counteract it. That made it worse, and it was the most horrific thing I've ever seen. And like I said, it was 2020, so I was there by myself with her. There was no 2 parents, there was none of that. It was horrible. And to be a parent, like, our only job essentially is to protect our kids, and you have to sit there and watch and be horrified, and to see the nurses come in with the chemo, and then with high dose, it's the same thing with like double gowns and gloves and masks and everything. Don't get this on you. Don't get this on you. And as a parent, personally, and for anybody that I've ever talked to in this community, we say we don't care. Yeah, we don't give a shit. It doesn't matter. And they'd come in and they do all this stuff. And because you think about it, just like before, it's going into their body, and what is it doing to them on the inside, that by the time it gets to me on the outside, that it's still that bad. This can't be the only options that we have. This can't be the only choices for our kids. There's got to be something better. And I know that research is happening. I know that there's people doing this. I had the very distinct opportunity a few years ago to tour a lab at UW-Madison where they were studying specifically neuroblastoma. And it was awesome because I was there with some of the brightest minds, these new students that are coming in, and they are ready to jump on this and figure this out and understand what's going on. I know that research is happening. I know they're trying, but everything it's like it gets piled up at the border crossing, right? You're there and you're going to be stuck there for hours for years, really, trying to get these things approved. Meanwhile, kids don't have anything better, or they're traveling. They're going out of the country to get better treatments. And there has to be something better. There has to be more options. There has to be better funding. There has to be a reality check that this situation is getting worse. You mentioned earlier that the ratio of kids getting diagnosed, when in 2020, you always heard 43 kids a day, and now it's 47 kids a day. And so everybody has to really take that into account. People like small numbers. Fine. Then every day you wake up, just realize that 47 children are going to be diagnosed with cancer that day. And you're looking at 400 plus thousand across the country, across the world, that are diagnosed. It's ridiculous. And it's 1 in 5. To me, what it means is that our government, our leaders from both sides of the aisle believe that 1 in 5 is acceptable loss, that's okay because those are good numbers. That's good odds.
I have lobbied Big Pharma. I did it a lot more before the pandemic because obviously things were crazy for a while after that. And I have, on more occasions than I can count on my fingers and toes, literally had said to my face, children just are not profitable enough. That was literally said to me. And like the fact that that could actually come out of anybody's mouth is just mind boggling to me. But that was the explanation for why, the funding situation is so dismal and, why we're not moving faster on things because it's rare. And I'm like, you clearly are not on the front line of this in any way, shape, or form, or no one that has ever had childhood cancer touch their lives in any way, shape, or form, because that is just a ridiculous statement in my mind. And I know that anyone, yourself included, knows that how ridiculous it is.